Maya Rodriguez had always been small for her age, but what she lacked in physical presence, she made up for in determination. At 22 years old, standing barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, she walked through the gates of the Marine Corps recruit depot with her head held high, despite the knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete as dozens of other recruits shuffled nervously around her, some looking confident, others appearing just as terrified as she felt inside. The bus ride to the depot had been quiet, filled with nervous energy and whispered conversations. Maya had kept to herself, staring out the window at the unfamiliar landscape rushing by. She thought about her grandmother's words before she left home: "Mija, you carry the heart of a warrior. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words echoed in her mind now as she clutched her single duffel bag and followed the crowd toward the processing building. Maya's decision to join the Marines hadn't been impulsive. After graduating from community college with decent grades but no clear direction, she had felt lost. Her family had struggled financially for years, and she wanted to do something meaningful with her life while also gaining the skills and benefits that military service could provide. The recruiter had been encouraging, telling her that the Marines valued heart and determination over size and that she had what it took to succeed. The first few hours at the depot were a blur of paperwork, medical examinations, and orientation briefings. Maya found herself grouped with 30 other female recruits who would form her training platoon. As she looked around at her fellow recruits, she noticed immediately that most of them were taller, more athletic-looking, and seemed to carry themselves with a natural confidence that she envied. Standing in formation for the first time, Maya became acutely aware of how she stood out. To her left was Jennifer Walsh, a former college basketball player who towered over everyone at nearly 6 feet tall. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, and her athletic build was obvious even in the baggy uniform they'd all been issued. To Maya's right stood Sarah Chen, a compact but muscular woman who mentioned she'd been a competitive swimmer in high school. Even the shorter recruits seemed to have a presence that Maya felt she lacked. The drill instructors arrived like a force of nature. Staff Sergeant Williams, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray eyes, began addressing the platoon with a voice that could cut through concrete. "Listen up, recruits. For the next 13 weeks, this is your world. You will eat, sleep, and breathe Marine Corps values. Some of you will make it through. Some of you will not. That depends entirely on what you're made of inside." As Staff Sergeant Williams paced up and down the formation, her eyes seemed to linger on Maya for just a moment longer than the others. Maya tried to stand as tall as possible, pulling her shoulders back and keeping her chin up, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being evaluated and found wanting. The first week of training was brutal for everyone, but Maya felt like she was drowning while others were learning to swim. The physical training sessions left her gasping for breath while some of her fellow recruits seemed barely winded. During the morning runs, she consistently found herself near the back of the pack, her shorter legs working twice as hard to keep up with the longer strides of her platoon mates. It was during these early struggles that the comments began. At first, they were subtle whispered jokes during downtime or sideways glances during formations. Jennifer Walsh seemed to be the ringleader, though she was careful to keep her voice low when drill instructors were nearby. "I don't know how little Maya thinks she's going to make it through this," Jennifer whispered to Sarah during a brief break between training exercises. "She can barely keep up with the warm-up run. What's she going to do when things get really tough?" Maya heard the comment but tried to ignore it, focusing instead on catching her breath and preparing for the next challenge. She had expected training to be difficult, but she hadn't anticipated the social dynamics that would make everything even harder. The comments escalated during the second week. While the drill instructors maintained strict discipline during official training hours, there were brief moments during meals, personal time, or transitions between activities when the recruits could talk among themselves. These moments became increasingly uncomfortable for Maya. "Hey, pocket size," Jennifer called out one evening as Maya was organizing her gear. "You might want to ask for a step stool so you can reach the top bunk." The comment drew snickers from several other recruits who were within earshot. Sarah Chen joined in with a mock-concerned tone. Maybe she should have joined the Coast Guard instead. "I hear they're not as picky about height requirements." This comment was particularly cutting because Maya knew that the Marines did have minimum height requirements, and at 5'3", she had just barely made the cut. Maya's face burned with embarrassment, but she kept her mouth shut. She had been taught by her grandmother never to show weakness to bullies, but she also knew that causing drama during boot camp could result in her being sent home. She needed this chance more than they could understand. The bullying wasn't constant, but it was persistent enough to wear on Maya's confidence. Comments about her size became a regular occurrence. During combat training, when recruits were paired up for exercises, Maya often found herself left out or reluctantly partnered with someone who made it clear they thought she would be a liability. "Great, I get the tiny one," she heard one recruit mutter when they were assigned as partners for a hand-to-hand combat drill. The instructor paired recruits randomly, but Maya couldn't help feeling like she was always the weak link that others had to carry. The physical challenges continued to be her biggest struggle. While Maya was determined and pushed herself harder than most, her progress seemed slower compared to her naturally athletic platoon mates. During obstacle courses, she had to work twice as hard to get over walls that others could practically step over. In the pool, her swimming technique was solid, but her smaller frame meant she moved through the water more slowly than the former swimmers and water polo players in her platoon. Maya's frustration grew as she watched other recruits not only excel physically but also bond with each other. During rare moments of downtime, she would see small groups forming, the former athletes gravitating toward each other, sharing stories about their past achievements and building friendships based on mutual respect for each other's abilities. She found herself increasingly isolated, eating meals alone and spending her few free moments writing letters home to her grandmother rather than socializing with her fellow recruits. In her letters, she tried to stay positive, describing the training and expressing determination to succeed, but she couldn't bring herself to mention the social challenges she was facing. One particularly difficult day during the third week, Maya stumbled during a long training run. She had been pushing herself to keep up with the main group when her tired legs simply couldn't maintain the pace anymore. She went down hard on the asphalt, scraping her palms and knees badly enough to draw blood. Several recruits ran past her without stopping, focused on their own performance. It was Jennifer who finally stopped, but not out of concern. "Come on, Rodriguez," she said in a voice loud enough for others to hear. "You're making the rest of us look bad. Maybe you should consider if you're really cut out for this." Maya struggled to her feet, her hands stinging and her pride wounded worse than her scraped knees. She finished the run, but at an even slower pace than before, arriving at the finish line long after most of her platoon had completed the course and begun their cool-down exercises. That evening, as Maya carefully cleaned her wounds in the bathroom, she overheard a conversation that cut deeper than any physical injury. Several recruits were talking while they prepared for lights out, apparently unaware that Maya was in the nearby stall. "I feel kind of bad for Maya," Sarah Chen was saying, though her tone didn't sound particularly sympathetic. "But, honestly, she's going to end up getting someone hurt if she makes it to the fleet. Can you imagine depending on her in a real combat situation?" "It's not her fault she's small," another voice replied, "but that doesn't change reality. The Marines aren't supposed to lower their standards for anyone. If she can't cut it, she can't cut it." Jennifer's voice was the clearest. "Look, I'm not trying to be mean, but this isn't summer camp. People's lives are going to depend on every Marine being able to do their job. If she struggles this much in training, how is she going to handle real pressure?" Maya stood frozen in the bathroom stall, her clean wounds throbbing as she listened to her fellow recruits discuss her inadequacy as if she weren't a real person with feelings and dreams. The worst part was that some of their concerns echoed her own fears. Was she really strong enough? Was she putting future Marines at risk by pursuing something she might not be capable of? As she made her way back to her bunk in the darkened barracks, Maya caught sight of her reflection in a window. The young woman looking back at her appeared small and uncertain, far different from the determined recruit who had walked through the gates just weeks earlier. For the first time since arriving at boot camp, she seriously considered quitting. That night, Maya lay in her narrow bunk staring at the ceiling while listening to the quiet sounds of 30 other women sleeping around her. Some snored softly, others shifted restlessly, but most seemed to sleep peacefully, their consciences clear and their confidence intact. Maya envied them their certainty. She thought about her grandmother's stories, told during long summer evenings on the small porch of their modest home. Stories about ancestors who had faced impossible odds, about family members who had served with honor, about the importance of never giving up when the cause was just. Her grandmother had always spoken with such pride about their family's military heritage, though she had been vague about the details. "We come from a long line of warriors, Mija," her grandmother would say, her weathered hands gesturing expressively. "It's in your blood, even if others can't see it at first glance." Maya had always assumed these were just encouraging words, the kind of family mythology that many families created to instill pride and confidence in younger generations. But, lying there in the darkness, feeling more alone and discouraged than she ever had in her life, she found herself wishing desperately that those stories were more than just inspiration. The next morning brought another day of training, another opportunity to prove herself or fail trying. As Maya laced up her boots and prepared to face whatever challenges the drill instructors had planned, she made a conscious decision. She wouldn't quit, no matter how hard the other recruits made things for her. She owed it to herself, to her family, and to the legacy her grandmother had spoken about to see this through. What Maya didn't know was that her greatest test was still coming, and that the very thing that made her feel most self-conscious, her family history, would soon reveal itself in a way that would change everything. The tattoo hidden beneath her uniform sleeve, a design her grandmother had insisted she get before leaving for boot camp, carried more significance than she had ever imagined. As she fell into formation with the rest of her platoon, Maya caught Jennifer Walsh's smirk and Sarah Chen's dismissive glance. They thought they knew who she was and what she was capable of. Soon, they would learn how wrong they had been. The legacy of her bloodline was about to reveal itself, but first, Maya would have to survive the growing pressure from those who believed she didn't belong. The harassment reached a breaking point during the fourth week of training when the platoon was assigned their most challenging exercise yet, a 3-day field training exercise in the wilderness surrounding the base. The recruits would be tested on everything they had learned so far, from combat techniques to survival skills, all while operating on minimal sleep and limited rations. Maya had been dreading this exercise since hearing about it during their first week. While she had gradually improved in some areas of training, she still struggled with activities that required raw physical strength or endurance. The field exercise would combine both, along with the added stress of working closely with platoon mates who had made no secret of their doubts about her abilities. The morning they departed for the field, Maya checked and double-checked her gear. Her pack felt impossibly heavy, loaded with everything she would need for 3 days in the wilderness. As the platoon formed up to march to the training area, she noticed Jennifer Walsh and her growing circle of followers whispering among themselves and occasionally glancing in her direction. "I give her 12 hours before she falls out," Maya heard Jennifer say to Sarah Chen as they began the march. "And then, the rest of us will have to carry her weight." The march to the training area took 4 hours over rough terrain. Maya's pack seemed to get heavier with each mile, and the straps cut into her shoulders despite her careful adjustments. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, maintaining her position in the formation even as sweat soaked through her uniform and her muscles screamed in protest. About halfway through the march, Maya began to fall behind. The combination of the heavy pack, the difficult terrain, and her shorter stride made it increasingly difficult to keep up with the pace set by the drill instructors. She could hear grumbling from some of the recruits behind her as the formation stretched out to accommodate her slower speed. "This is exactly what I was talking about," Jennifer's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "She's already slowing us down, and the real training hasn't even started yet." Staff Sergeant Williams noticed the formation stretching and called for a brief halt. As the recruits caught their breath, Maya could feel the disapproving stares of her platoon mates. She knew they blamed her for the unscheduled break, even though several other recruits looked equally exhausted. "Rodriguez," Staff Sergeant Williams called out, approaching Maya with an unreadable expression. "How are you holding up?" Maya straightened despite her fatigue. "Fine, Staff Sergeant." "Ready to continue." The drill instructor studied Maya for a long moment, then glanced at the rest of the platoon. "Good. Because this march is just the warm-up. The real test starts when we reach the training area." When they finally arrived at the remote training site, Maya was running on pure determination. Her legs felt like rubber, and her pack had rubbed raw spots on her shoulders despite the padding. But she had completed the march without falling out, even if she had slowed the pace for everyone else. The training site was a collection of temporary shelters and equipment stations spread across several acres of rough woodland. For the next 3 days, the recruits would live in field conditions, participating in various exercises designed to test their skills under stress. The first major challenge came that afternoon, a combat simulation exercise where the platoon was divided into two teams for a mock battle scenario. Maya found herself on a team led by Jennifer Walsh, who made no effort to hide her displeasure at the assignment. "Great," Jennifer muttered as she looked over her team roster. "They stuck me with dead weight." She looked directly at Maya as she said this, making sure her opinion was clearly understood. The exercise required the teams to navigate through dense woods, locate enemy positions, and complete various objectives while avoiding capture by opposing forces. Maya's team was tasked with reaching a specific checkpoint and recovering intelligence materials within a 2-hour time limit. From the beginning, Jennifer made it clear that Maya would be a liability. "You stay in the back," she instructed as the team prepared to move out. "Try not to slow us down or give away our position." Maya bit back her response and took her assigned position at the rear of the formation. As they moved through the woods, she focused on staying quiet and keeping up with the pace. Her smaller size actually proved to be an advantage in the dense undergrowth, allowing her to move through areas where the taller recruits had to push through branches and vines. About an hour into the exercise, Maya's team encountered their first challenge. The path to their objective was blocked by a simulated enemy position that they needed to bypass without being detected. Jennifer called for a halt to assess the situation and plan their approach. "We need to circle around to the east," one of the team members suggested, studying the terrain. "That'll take too long," Jennifer replied. "We need a more direct route." Maya had been quietly observing the enemy position and noticed something the others had missed. There was a small ravine that ran parallel to the enemy position, hidden by thick vegetation. It would be a difficult route, requiring the team to crawl through mud and undergrowth, but it would get them past the enemy without being detected. "What about the ravine?" Maya suggested quietly, pointing to the depression she had spotted. Jennifer barely glanced in the direction Maya indicated. "That's too risky. We're not crawling through the mud because you're afraid to take the direct approach." "But it would work," Maya insisted, her voice still respectful but more confident. "They won't be watching that route, and we can get past them without being seen." "No," Jennifer said firmly. "We're going east." End of discussion. The team followed Jennifer's plan, but the longer route cost them valuable time. When they finally reached their objective, they had only 15 minutes left to complete their mission. As they hurried to locate and retrieve the intelligence materials, Maya couldn't help but think that her suggested route would have given them the extra time they needed. They completed the exercise with only 3 minutes to spare, barely making the deadline. As they regrouped with the other teams, Maya overheard Jennifer complaining to the drill instructors about how difficult it was to complete objectives when some team members couldn't pull their weight. That evening, as the platoon gathered around a small fire for their meal of military rations, the social dynamics became even more pronounced. The successful teams shared stories of their achievements, while those who had struggled were subjected to critiques and suggestions for improvement. Maya sat slightly apart from the main group, eating her meal in silence while listening to Jennifer regale the others with an embellished account of their exercise. In Jennifer's version, Maya's suggestion about the ravine wasn't mentioned, and the near failure to complete the mission was attributed entirely to Maya's inability to keep up. "I'm telling you," Jennifer said, her voice carrying clearly in the still evening air, "some people just aren't cut out for this. And, when they insist on staying, they put everyone else at risk." Sarah Chan nodded sympathetically. "It's not fair to the rest of us. We're all working twice as hard to make up for the weak links." Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but she forced herself to remain silent. Speaking up would only draw more attention to herself and give Jennifer more ammunition for future attacks. Instead, she finished her meal quickly and retreated to her assigned sleeping area. The second day of the field exercise brought new challenges, including a timed obstacle course that had to be completed as a team. The course included rope climbs, wall scaling, and various barriers that required teamwork to overcome. Maya's heart sank as she saw the obstacles, knowing that her size and strength would once again make her the weak link. The platoon was divided into smaller squads for this exercise, and, once again, Maya found herself grouped with several of the recruits who had been most vocal about their doubts regarding her abilities. As they approached the first obstacle, a 12-foot wooden wall, the tension was palpable. Okay, here's how we do this, Jennifer announced, taking charge of their squad. The stronger climbers go first and help pull the rest up. Maya, you go last so we can make sure you get over. The implication was clear: Maya would need help getting over obstacles that the others could handle on their own. As Maya watched her squadmates scale the wall with varying degrees of difficulty, she felt the familiar knot of anxiety and determination warring in her stomach. When her turn came, Maya approached the wall with grim resolve. She had practiced this obstacle dozens of times during training, and, while she wasn't the fastest climber, she had always managed to complete it on her own. But, as she reached for the top of the wall, she felt hands grabbing her arms and roughly pulling her up. Come on, Jennifer grunted as she and another recruit hauled Maya over the wall. We don't have all day. Maya wanted to protest that she could have made it on her own, but there was no time for arguments. The clock was running, and their squad's performance was being measured against the other teams. The pattern continued throughout the obstacle course. Even when Maya successfully completed obstacles independently, her squadmates insisted on helping her, treating her like a liability that needed to be managed rather than a team member with her own capabilities. By the time they finished the course, Maya felt more demoralized than after any previous training exercise. They had achieved a respectable time, but Maya felt like she had been carried through the course rather than contributing to the team's success. That evening brought the final challenge of the field exercise, a night navigation course that each recruit had to complete individually. Using only a map, compass, and red-filtered flashlight, they had to navigate to several checkpoints scattered throughout the dark woods and return to base camp within 4 hours. Maya actually felt a surge of relief when she heard about this exercise. Finally, a challenge where she would succeed or fail based entirely on her own skills, without having to deal with the dynamics of working with unsupportive teammates. She had always been good with maps and navigation, a skill she had learned during family camping trips with her grandmother. While other recruits worried about getting lost in the dark woods, Maya felt confident in her ability to read terrain and follow compass bearings accurately. As the recruits spread out to begin their individual navigation courses, Maya heard Jennifer's parting comment: "Try not to get lost out there, pocket size. We don't want to have to send a search party after you." Maya ignored the comment and focused on studying her map by the dim red light of her flashlight. She plotted her route carefully, identifying terrain features that would help her navigate in the darkness and planning the most efficient path between checkpoints. The night navigation turned out to be exactly what Maya needed. Moving alone through the dark woods, relying on her own skills and judgment, she felt more confident than she had since arriving at boot camp. Her smaller size was actually an advantage in the dense undergrowth, allowing her to move quietly and efficiently through areas that might slow down larger recruits. Maya completed her navigation course in excellent time, reaching all the required checkpoints and returning to base camp well ahead of the deadline. She was one of the first recruits to finish, and she had done it entirely on her own merits. As other recruits began trickling back into camp, Maya allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had proven, at least to herself, that she belonged here. She might not be the strongest or the fastest, but she had skills and determination that counted for something. However, her moment of triumph was short-lived. When Jennifer finally returned to camp, nearly an hour after Maya, she was clearly frustrated and embarrassed by her poor performance on the navigation exercise. Instead of acknowledging that Maya had outperformed her, Jennifer found a way to twist the situation. "I can't believe they made that course so easy," Jennifer complained loudly to anyone who would listen. Even Maya managed to finish it on time. They must have dumbed it down for the weaker recruits. The comment stung because it dismissed Maya's genuine achievement and turned it into evidence of lowered standards rather than personal competence. Once again, Maya found herself in a no-win situation where success was explained away and failure was held against her. As the platoon prepared to return to base the next morning, Maya reflected on the 3 days in the field. She had survived every challenge, completed every exercise, and even excelled in some areas. But, instead of earning respect from her fellow recruits, she felt more isolated than ever. The harassment hadn't stopped, it had just evolved to accommodate the fact that she was proving more resilient than her tormentors had expected. The march back to base was quieter than the march out. Everyone was tired, and the drill instructors kept the pace steady but not punishing. Maya had learned to distribute the weight in her pack more effectively, and the return journey was easier than the initial march. But, as they approached the familiar gates of the training depot, Maya knew that the real challenges were still ahead. The field exercise had shown her that she could handle the physical demands of Marine training, but it had also shown her that some of her fellow recruits were determined to undermine her regardless of her performance. What Maya didn't realize was that her grandmother's stories about their family's military heritage were about to become relevant in ways she never could have imagined. The tattoo on her shoulder, hidden beneath her uniform sleeve, carried a significance that would soon change everything. But, first, she would have to endure the most intense period of harassment yet, as Jennifer Walsh and her followers escalated their campaign to prove that Maya didn't belong in the Marines. The 6th week of boot camp brought the most intensive period of training yet. The drill instructors had warned the platoon that this phase would separate those who truly had what it took to become Marines from those who were just going through the motions. For Maya, it also marked the beginning of the most difficult period she had faced since arriving at the depot. Jennifer Walsh's campaign against Maya had grown more organized and systematic. What had started as casual mockery had evolved into a deliberate effort to undermine Maya's confidence and push her toward quitting. Jennifer had recruited several other recruits to her cause, creating a toxic environment that made Maya's daily existence miserable. The harassment now extended beyond mere comments about Maya's size or abilities. Jennifer and her followers began sabotaging Maya's equipment and living space in small ways that were difficult to prove but impossible to ignore. Maya would find her gear slightly out of place, her bunk unmade after she had carefully prepared it for inspection, or her personal items moved or hidden. During one particularly stressful morning inspection, Maya discovered that someone had loosened the straps on her pack, causing her carefully arranged gear to spill out across the barracks floor just as the drill instructor arrived for inspection. The resulting punishment detail cost Maya her only free time that day, time she desperately needed for equipment maintenance and letter writing. "Looks like someone needs to learn how to pack properly," Jennifer commented with false sympathy as Maya scrambled to clean up the mess. "Maybe if you paid more attention to your gear instead of just trying to survive each day, you'd be better prepared." The incident was reported as Maya's failure to maintain her equipment properly, and there was no way to prove that sabotage had been involved. Staff Sergeant Williams gave Maya a sharp lecture about attention to detail and personal responsibility, adding to her growing sense of isolation and frustration. Physical training became increasingly difficult as Maya's confidence eroded. Even exercises she had been improving on became sources of anxiety as she worried about making mistakes that would give her tormentors more ammunition. During combat drills, her assigned partners would make subtle comments about feeling unsafe with such a small partner, undermining her focus and performance. "I hope I don't get stuck with Maya during the next exercise," Sarachin said loudly enough for Maya to hear as they prepared for hand-to-hand combat training. "I need a partner who can actually challenge me, not someone I have to worry about accidentally hurting." The comment was designed to sound like concern for Maya's safety, but the underlying message was clear: Maya was too weak to be a real training partner. These constant undermining comments were wearing down Maya's mental resilience faster than any physical challenge. Maya's performance began to suffer noticeably. The stress of constant harassment, combined with her increasing social isolation, affected her sleep, her appetite, and her ability to focus during training. She found herself making mistakes she wouldn't have made earlier in training, which only provided more evidence for those who insisted she didn't belong. During a marksmanship exercise, Maya's normally steady hands shook as she aimed at the targets. She had always been a decent shot, but the pressure of knowing that Jennifer and others were watching and waiting for her to fail made it impossible to concentrate. Her scores were significantly lower than her previous performance, leading to additional criticism from the drill instructors. "Rodriguez, what happened to your shooting?" Staff Sergeant Williams demanded after reviewing Maya's scores. "You were performing adequately before. Are you losing focus when it matters most?" Maya couldn't explain that her poor performance was due to harassment and sabotage without sounding like she was making excuses. In the military culture of personal responsibility and mental toughness, complaining about bullying was often seen as weakness rather than a legitimate concern. "No excuse, Staff Sergeant," Maya replied, using the standard response drilled into every recruit. "I'll do better next time." But, privately, Maya was beginning to doubt whether there would be a next time. For the first time since arriving at boot camp, she seriously considered whether Jennifer and the others might be right about her not belonging in the Marines. The breaking point came during the 7th week of training, when the platoon was assigned to a particularly challenging team-building exercise. The exercise required groups of 8 recruits to work together to solve a series of problems while carrying heavy equipment across difficult terrain. Success depended entirely on teamwork, communication, and mutual support. Maya was assigned to a group that included Jennifer, Sarah, and several other recruits who had been most vocal in their criticism of her abilities. From the moment the exercise began, it was clear that this group had no intention of treating Maya as an equal team member. "Okay, here's how we're going to do this," Jennifer announced as she took charge of the group. "The stronger people will carry the heavy equipment, and Maya can carry the lighter stuff so she doesn't slow us down." Maya was assigned to carry a map case and some communication equipment while the other team members shouldered heavy packs, weapons, and specialized gear. On the surface, this seemed like a reasonable division of labor based on physical capabilities, but Maya recognized it for what it really was: another way to marginalize her and make her feel like a burden. As the exercise progressed, Maya's role in the group became increasingly minimal. When the team encountered navigation challenges, Maya's suggestions were ignored or dismissed, even when she spotted obvious errors in their route planning. During problem-solving exercises, her input was either overlooked or criticized as impractical. "Maya, why don't you just focus on keeping up and let the rest of us handle the thinking?" Jennifer said with false sweetness when Maya tried to point out a more efficient way to cross a stream with their equipment. The most humiliating moment came when the team had to cross a series of obstacles that required lifting and supporting each other's weight. Instead of incorporating Maya into their system of mutual assistance, the other team members worked around her, treating her like a piece of equipment to be managed rather than a contributing team member. "We'll boost Maya over first, then the rest of us can handle the difficult parts," Sarah suggested as they approached a high wall obstacle. "I can help lift others too," Maya protested, but her offer was dismissed immediately. "That's okay," Jennifer replied. "We've got it covered. You just worry about getting yourself over." Maya was essentially carried through the obstacle course by her teammates, who made sure everyone watching understood that she was being helped rather than contributing. By the end of the exercise, Maya felt completely demoralized and humiliated. The team completed the exercise successfully, but Maya knew that her participation had been minimal and grudging. During the debrief with the drill instructors, her teammates were praised for their teamwork and leadership, while Maya's contribution went unmentioned. That evening, Maya sat alone in the barracks writing what she thought might be her last letter home to her grandmother. For the first time, she allowed herself to admit the full extent of what she was experiencing at boot camp. "Dear Abuela," she wrote, her hand trembling slightly as she held the pen. "Training is harder than I expected, not just physically but in other ways too. Some of the other recruits don't think I belong here, and sometimes I'm starting to wonder if they're right. I don't want to disappoint you or give up on my dreams, but I'm not sure I'm strong enough for this." As she wrote, Maya thought about her grandmother's stories of their family's military heritage. Her grandmother had always been proud of their bloodline, speaking with reverence about ancestors who had served with distinction in various conflicts. But those stories seemed like distant mythology now, disconnected from Maya's current struggle to simply survive each day of training. Maya had never told her grandmother about the tattoo she had gotten before leaving for boot camp. It was a small design on her upper shoulder, usually hidden by her uniform sleeves, incorporating symbols that her grandmother had described as important to their family history. Maya had gotten the tattoo partly as a good luck charm and partly as a way to carry a piece of her heritage with her during the challenging months ahead. The tattoo depicted an eagle perched on an anchor, surrounded by a few small stars and the words "honor" bound in elegant script. Maya had chosen the design based on her grandmother's descriptions of military symbols that were meaningful to their family, though she hadn't fully understood the specific significance of the elements she included. As Maya struggled with her letter, trying to find the right words to explain her situation without worrying her grandmother unnecessarily, she unconsciously touched the area where her tattoo was hidden beneath her uniform. The small gesture brought back memories of her grandmother's voice, telling stories of courage and resilience in the face of impossible odds. "We are stronger than we appear, Mija," her grandmother had said during one of their last conversations before Maya left for boot camp. "Sometimes that strength is hidden until the moment we need it most." Maya finished her letter without mentioning her thoughts of quitting, instead focusing on her determination to make her family proud. But, as she sealed the envelope, she couldn't shake the feeling that her time at boot camp might be coming to an end. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Staff Sergeant Williams announced that the platoon would be receiving a special visitor for their training session that day, a retired Navy SEAL who would be conducting a guest lecture on advanced combat techniques and mental toughness. The announcement generated excited buzz among the recruits. Most had never met an actual Navy SEAL, and the opportunity to learn from one of the military's elite special operations personnel was thrilling. Even Maya felt a spark of interest, despite her current struggles with motivation. Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rivera arrived at the training facility that morning carrying an aura of quiet confidence that immediately commanded respect. He was a man of medium height but impressive build, with graying hair and weathered features that spoke of years spent in demanding military environments. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had seen and done things that most people could only imagine. "Good morning, Marines," Master Chief Rivera began, his eyes scanning the assembled platoon with professional assessment. "I'm here today to talk to you about what it really means to be a warrior, and about the mental toughness that separates those who succeed from those who give up when things get difficult." Maya listened intently as Master Chief Rivera began his presentation, describing scenarios from his years of special operations service where success had depended not on physical strength alone, but on mental resilience, creative thinking, and the ability to work effectively as part of a team regardless of individual differences. "I've served with Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen of every size, background, and physical capability you can imagine," Master Chief Rivera continued. "And I can tell you that some of the most effective warriors I've known were people that others might underestimate at first glance." As he spoke, Maya felt something stirring inside her that she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Here was someone who understood that military effectiveness wasn't just about physical prowess, but about character, determination, and the ability to contribute to something larger than oneself. Master Chief Rivera's presentation continued with specific examples of situations where unconventional thinking and diverse perspectives had made the difference between mission success and failure. He talked about the importance of mental toughness in overcoming not just enemy action, but the internal doubts and external pressures that every warrior faced. "The enemy you face in your own mind is often more dangerous than anything you'll encounter in the field," he said, his eyes seeming to look directly at Maya for a moment. "Learning to overcome that internal enemy is what separates true warriors from everyone else." As the presentation moved toward its conclusion, Master Chief Rivera asked if any of the recruits had questions about special operations service or military careers in general. Several hands went up, and he fielded questions about training requirements, deployment schedules, and the mental challenges of high-stress military service. Maya wanted to ask a question but didn't trust her voice to remain steady. She was still struggling with her own internal enemy, still wondering whether she had the mental toughness that Master Chief Rivera was describing. As the session ended and the recruits prepared to return to their regular training schedule, Master Chief Rivera made an announcement that would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. "Before you go," he said, "I want to mention something that might interest some of you. I'll be staying on base for the rest of the week to conduct some additional training sessions for recruits who are interested in learning more about special operations careers. These sessions will be voluntary and will take place during evening hours, but they'll give you insights into what it takes to serve in America's most elite military units." Maya felt a surge of interest despite her current struggles. If she was going to wash out of boot camp, at least she could learn something valuable from one of the military's most elite warriors. She decided to attend Master Chief Rivera's evening sessions, not knowing that this decision would finally reveal the truth about her family heritage and change her relationship with her fellow recruits forever. As the platoon returned to regular training, Maya noticed that Jennifer and her followers seemed particularly animated about something. They were whispering among themselves more than usual, occasionally glancing in Maya's direction with expressions that suggested they were planning something particularly unpleasant. Maya had no way of knowing that her tormentors were planning their most devastating attack yet, designed to humiliate her so thoroughly that she would have no choice but to quit. But she also had no way of knowing that the very thing they were planning to use against her would instead reveal a family legacy that would earn her the respect and admiration of everyone who had doubted her. The evening session with Master Chief Rivera was scheduled for 1900 hours in one of the smaller training rooms on base. Maya arrived early, hoping to find a seat in the back where she could listen without drawing attention to herself. To her disappointment, she discovered that Jennifer Walsh and several other recruits from her platoon had also decided to attend. Maya took a seat near the wall and tried to make herself invisible as other recruits filtered into the room. The atmosphere was different from the formal training sessions they were used to. This was voluntary, more intimate, and Master Chief Rivera had indicated that questions and discussion would be encouraged. "Good evening," Master Chief Rivera began as he surveyed the group of about 20 recruits who had chosen to attend. "I'm glad to see so many of you interested in pushing yourselves beyond the minimum requirements. That mindset is the first step toward excellence in any military career." The session began with Master Chief Rivera sharing stories from his years in special operations, describing missions and challenges that required not just physical capability but mental agility, creative problem-solving, and the ability to work effectively with diverse teams under extreme pressure. Maya found herself completely absorbed in the stories, forgetting for a moment about her current struggles and doubts. Master Chief Rivera described scenarios where success had depended on the unique contributions of team members who brought different strengths to the mission. "I remember one operation where our team included a guy who was barely 5'6" and couldn't have weighed more than 140 pounds, Master Chief Rivera said, his eyes unconsciously drifting toward Maya as he spoke. "The rest of us were typical Navy SEAL specimens, tall, heavy, built like linebackers. But this guy ended up being the key to mission success because he could fit through spaces the rest of us couldn't navigate." Maya felt a flutter of hope at this story, but she also noticed Jennifer and her followers exchanging meaningful glances. She had a sinking feeling that they were planning something, and her presence at this session was somehow playing into their scheme. As the session continued, Master Chief Rivera opened the floor for questions. Several recruits asked about the physical requirements for special operations training, the mental challenges of high-stress missions, and the career opportunities available in elite military units. Maya wanted to ask a question but hesitated, knowing that speaking up would draw attention to herself. Before she could decide whether to take the risk, Jennifer Walsh raised her hand. "Master Chief," Jennifer began with a tone of false concern, "what would you say to someone who's struggling with the basic requirements of regular boot camp? Should they even consider special operations, or would that be setting themselves up for failure?" Maya felt her cheeks burn as she realized that the question was directed at her situation. Jennifer was using Master Chief Rivera's presence to publicly highlight Maya's struggles and suggest that she had no business even thinking about advanced military training. Master Chief Rivera studied Jennifer for a moment before responding, his experienced eyes seeming to assess not just the question but the motivation behind it. "That's an interesting question," he replied thoughtfully. "But I think you're making some assumptions that might not be accurate. In my experience, the people who struggle the most with basic training are often the ones who end up excelling in advanced roles, because they've had to develop mental toughness and resilience that others take for granted." Jennifer's confident expression faltered slightly at this response, which wasn't the validation of her position that she had clearly expected. But she wasn't finished with her attack. "I guess what I'm wondering is," Jennifer continued, "shouldn't there be some realistic standards about who can handle advanced training? I mean, if someone can barely keep up with basic requirements, isn't it kind of irresponsible to encourage them to pursue something even more demanding?" Maya felt the eyes of everyone in the room turning toward her, and she knew that Jennifer's questions were being understood by everyone as commentary on her struggles. She wanted to sink into her chair and disappear, but Master Chief Rivera's next words stopped her cold. "You know," Master Chief Rivera said, his tone becoming more serious, "I've noticed something interesting about the recruits who ask questions like that. They're usually the ones who are most worried about their own performance, so they try to focus attention on someone else's supposed weaknesses." The room fell silent as the implication of his words sank in. Jennifer's face flushed red as she realized that her attempt to publicly humiliate Maya had backfired spectacularly. But Master Chief Rivera wasn't finished. "And, speaking of standards and qualifications, I'm curious about something else. How many of you can honestly say you know your own family's military history? How many of you understand the legacy you're trying to live up to?" Several recruits raised their hands, and Master Chief Rivera nodded approvingly. "Family military tradition can be a powerful motivator," he continued. "Sometimes it provides strength and inspiration when you need it most. Maya thought about her grandmother's stories and felt a pang of regret that she had never learned more specific details about their family's military service. But what happened next would change everything she thought she knew about her heritage. "I'm particularly interested in military tattoos," Master Chief Rivera said, seeming to shift topics abruptly. "They're often more meaningful than people realize. I've seen tattoos that tell stories about family history, unit pride, and personal dedication that go back generations." Maya unconsciously touched her shoulder where her tattoo was hidden beneath her uniform sleeve. She had gotten the design based on her grandmother's descriptions, but she had never fully understood its specific significance. Jennifer, still smarting from Master Chief Rivera's earlier comments, seized on what she saw as another opportunity to embarrass Maya. "Speaking of tattoos," she said with malicious sweetness, "some people get military-themed tattoos even when they have no real military background. Isn't that kind of disrespectful?" Maya's heart raced as she realized that Jennifer somehow knew about her tattoo. She must have seen it during one of the many times they had changed clothes in the barracks or during medical examinations. "That's true," Master Chief Rivera replied, his expression becoming more serious. "Stolen valor is a real problem, and people who claim military honors they haven't earned deserve to be called out for it." Maya felt panic rising in her chest. Was her tattoo some kind of stolen valor? Had she unknowingly claimed honors that she hadn't earned? Her grandmother had never explained the specific meaning of the symbols she had suggested, and Maya had assumed they were just general military imagery. Jennifer's smile became predatory as she sensed Maya's discomfort. "Maybe people should have to explain their military tattoos," she suggested with false innocence. "You know, to make sure they're legitimate." Master Chief Rivera studied Jennifer with an expression that was becoming increasingly cold. "That's an excellent idea," he said finally. "Why don't we start with you? Do you have any military tattoos that you'd like to explain?" Jennifer's confident expression faltered. "Well, no, I don't have any tattoos yet. I was thinking I might get one after I graduate boot camp." "I see," Master Chief Rivera replied. "So you're suggesting that someone else should have to justify their choices when you haven't made any comparable commitments yourself. That's interesting." The room was becoming increasingly tense as the verbal sparring continued, but Maya was too worried about her own situation to appreciate Jennifer's discomfort. What if her tattoo really was inappropriate? What if her grandmother had given her bad advice about the design? As if reading her thoughts, Master Chief Rivera's eyes turned directly to Maya. "What about you?" he asked gently. "Do you have any military-themed tattoos?" Maya's throat felt dry as every eye in the room focused on her. She could lie and deny having any tattoos, but that would be dishonest and would probably be discovered eventually anyway. Or she could admit to the tattoo and face whatever consequences came from having possibly inappropriate military imagery. "Yes, Master Chief," she said quietly, her voice barely audible in the silent room. "I do have one. Would you mind describing it?" Master Chief Rivera asked, his tone remaining gentle but authoritative. Maya took a deep breath, knowing that this moment might mark the end of her military career before it had really begun. "It's on my shoulder," she said, her voice growing steadier as she committed to honesty. "It shows an eagle perched on an anchor, with some stars around it, and the words honor bound underneath." The room remained silent, but Maya noticed that Master Chief Rivera's expression had changed dramatically. Instead of disapproval or suspicion, his face showed surprise and something that looked almost like recognition. "And where did you get the idea for that design?" he asked, his voice taking on a different quality than it had held moments before. "My grandmother," Maya replied honestly. "She told me stories about our family's military service, and she suggested symbols that were important to our heritage. But she never explained exactly what they meant or where they came from." Master Chief Rivera was quiet for a long moment, studying Maya with an intensity that made her even more nervous. The other recruits in the room seemed to sense that something significant was happening, but they couldn't understand what it was. Finally, Master Chief Rivera spoke again, and his words would change everything. "What's your full name?" he asked. "Maya Isabella Rodriguez," she replied, wondering why that mattered. Master Chief Rivera's eyes widened slightly, and he leaned forward in his chair. "And your grandmother's name?" Elena Rodriguez, Maya answered, becoming increasingly confused about the direction of the questioning. Well, Elena Martinez Rodriguez now, but her maiden name was Martinez. The change in Master Chief Rivera's demeanor was dramatic and immediate. His expression shifted from professional interest to something approaching awe, and, when he spoke again, his voice carried a reverence that hadn't been there before. Elena Martinez, he repeated slowly. Would that be Elena Martinez who served as a Navy corpsman with Marine units in Vietnam? Maya's heart stopped. Her grandmother had never mentioned serving in Vietnam, never mentioned being a Navy corpsman, never given Maya any specific details about her military service. All Maya had ever heard were vague stories about family military tradition. I don't know, Maya admitted, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden turn the conversation had taken. She never talked about the details of her service. Master Chief Rivera stood up slowly, his entire bearing changing to one of profound respect. Elena Martinez, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room, was one of the most decorated Navy corpsmen of the Vietnam War. She saved the lives of dozens of Marines under fire, earned 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, and a Navy Cross for valor under enemy fire. Maya felt the room spinning around her as the implications of Master Chief Rivera's words sank in. Her grandmother, the quiet woman who had raised her after her parents died, who had told simple stories about family strength and courage, was a war hero whose service had earned recognition from the highest levels of the military. But that's not even the most remarkable part of her story, Master Chief Rivera continued, his voice filled with emotion. Elena Martinez was the first female Navy corpsman to be assigned to a Marine Special Operations unit. She served with distinction in some of the most dangerous missions of the war, and she saved the life of every man in her unit at least once. Maya's hands were shaking as the full weight of her heritage became clear. The tattoo she had gotten based on her grandmother's vague suggestions wasn't stolen valor, it was a tribute to one of the most heroic military careers in modern American history. The eagle on an anchor with stars, Master Chief Rivera explained to the stun room, was the unofficial symbol of Elena Martinez's unit. The words "honor bound" were her personal motto, something she would say when treating wounded Marines under fire. She was honor bound to save every life she could, no matter the danger to herself. Jennifer Walsh's face had gone completely white as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. Instead of exposing Maya as a fraud, she had inadvertently revealed that Maya was the granddaughter of a genuine American war hero, someone whose courage and sacrifice had become legendary in military circles. Master Chief Rivera turned back to Maya, his expression now one of profound respect and understanding. Your grandmother never told you about her service? No, Master Chief, Maya replied, tears starting to form in her eyes. She just told me stories about family strength and courage. She said we came from a line of warriors, but I thought she was just trying to encourage me. Elena Martinez never talked about her service because she was too humble to recognize her own heroism, Master Chief Rivera explained. But every Marine who served with her, and every corpsman who came after her, knows her name and her story. The room was completely silent as the other recruits absorbed what they had just learned. Jennifer Walsh looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor, while the other recruits who had participated in Maya's harassment appeared stunned and ashamed. Master Chief Rivera walked over to where Maya was sitting, his movements deliberate and respectful. Would you mind showing us that tattoo? He asked gently. With trembling hands, Maya rolled up her uniform sleeve to reveal the design on her shoulder. Master Chief Rivera studied it for a moment, then nodded with satisfaction. It's perfect, he said simply. Every detail is exactly right. Your grandmother must have described it to you very carefully. Maya looked at the tattoo that had been hidden beneath her uniform for months, seeing it now with completely new understanding. It wasn't just a collection of military symbols, it was a tribute to her grandmother's extraordinary service and a symbol of the legacy she carried. Elena Martinez, Master Chief Rivera said, addressing the entire room now, set standards for courage and dedication that most of us can only aspire to reach. The fact that her granddaughter is here, following in her footsteps, is both an honor for the Marine Corps and a testament to the kind of character that runs in military families. He turned back to Maya, his expression serious but warm. Now I understand why you've been struggling with some of the social dynamics here. It's not because you lack courage or ability, it's because you've been carrying the weight of a legacy you didn't even fully understand. But, I can tell you this, Elena Martinez's granddaughter doesn't need anyone else's approval to prove she belongs in the Marines. Your bloodline speaks for itself. The impact of Master Chief Rivera's words on the other recruits was immediate and dramatic. Jennifer Walsh, who had been the leader of Maya's tormentors, now looked like she was going to be sick. The other recruits who had participated in the harassment seemed to be re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about Maya. Sarah Chen, who had been one of Jennifer's most vocal supporters, was the first to speak. "Maya," she said quietly, her voice filled with regret, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry for how we've been treating you." Other recruits began to murmur similar apologies, their earlier hostility replaced by embarrassment and newfound respect. The social dynamics that had made Maya's life miserable for weeks were crumbling as the truth about her heritage became clear. But Master Chief Rivera wasn't finished. "There's something else you should all understand," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen the best and worst of military service. "Maya's performance during training makes perfect sense when you understand her background. She's been unconsciously living up to standards set by one of the bravest Marines who ever served. That kind of pressure would challenge anyone." He gestured toward Maya, who was still trying to process everything she had learned. Elena Martinez never backed down from a challenge, never quit when things got difficult, and never let anyone tell her she didn't belong where she chose to serve. From what I've observed and heard about Maya's performance, she's inherited every bit of that determination. Master Chief Rivera's words were having a profound effect on everyone in the room, but especially on Maya herself. For weeks, she had been questioning whether she had what it took to be a Marine, whether she was strong enough or tough enough to live up to the standards expected of her. Now she understood that those standards had been set, in part, by her own grandmother. "The harassment you've been experiencing," Master Chief Rivera continued, looking directly at Jennifer and the other recruits who had targeted Maya, "is exactly the kind of behavior that Elena Martinez fought against throughout her career. She proved that courage and competence have nothing to do with size or conventional expectations, and she paved the way for every woman who has served in combat roles since." Jennifer Walsh finally found her voice, though it was much quieter and less confident than usual. "Master Chief," she said hesitantly, "we didn't know about Maya's family history. We just thought." "You thought what?" Master Chief Rivera interrupted, his tone becoming stern. "You thought that someone smaller than you couldn't be as capable? You thought that struggling with certain aspects of training meant she didn't belong here?" Elena Martinez faced those same prejudices, and she overcame them by proving her worth through action and determination. The rebuke was clear and unmistakable. Jennifer and her followers had been engaging in exactly the kind of discrimination that Maya's grandmother had fought to overcome during her own groundbreaking military career. Master Chief Rivera turned back to Maya, his expression softening again. "Your grandmother would be incredibly proud of how you've handled yourself during training. The fact that you've persevered despite facing harassment and self-doubt shows that you've inherited her strength and character." Maya felt tears streaming down her face as the full weight of her heritage and the respect of Master Chief Rivera combined to wash away weeks of accumulated pain and doubt. She wasn't just a struggling recruit anymore, she was the granddaughter of a hero, carrying on a legacy of service and sacrifice. "Thank you, Master Chief," she managed to say through her tears. "I wish my grandmother had told me more about her service." "She probably thought you needed to find your own way first," Master Chief Rivera replied with understanding. Elena Martinez always believed that true strength comes from within, not from external recognition. She likely wanted you to discover your own courage before learning about hers. As the session ended and the recruits began to file out of the room, the change in atmosphere was palpable. Maya found herself surrounded by fellow recruits who wanted to apologize for their earlier behavior and expressed their newfound respect for her heritage. Jennifer Walsh approached Maya hesitantly, her earlier confidence completely gone. "Maya," she said quietly, "I'm really sorry for everything. I had no idea about your family history, but that's no excuse for how I treated you. I was wrong, and I hope you can forgive me." Maya looked at the young woman who had made her life miserable for weeks, and, instead of anger or resentment, she felt a surprising sense of compassion. Jennifer's behavior had been wrong, but it had come from her own insecurities and prejudices rather than genuine malice. "Thank you for apologizing," Maya replied simply. "I hope we can start over." As Maya walked back to the barracks that evening, she felt like a completely different person than the one who had arrived for the session. She was still the same physically small recruit facing the same challenging training, but she now understood that she carried within her the legacy of one of the bravest women who had ever worn a military uniform. The tattoo on her shoulder, which had been hidden beneath her sleeve for months, now felt like a badge of honor rather than a personal decoration. It connected her to her grandmother's extraordinary service and reminded her that she came from a bloodline of warriors who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Maya's story was far from over. She still had weeks of training ahead of her, challenges to overcome, and skills to master. But she would face those challenges with a new understanding of her own heritage and the knowledge that she carried within her the same courage and determination that had made her grandmother a legend. The bullies who had mocked her size and doubted her abilities now understood that they had been wrong about everything. Maya Rodriguez wasn't just another struggling recruit, she was the heir to a legacy of heroism that would inspire her to achieve things that none of them had imagined possible. As she prepared for sleep that night, Maya touched the tattoo on her shoulder and whispered the words that had been her grandmother's motto, "Honor bound." She was honor bound to live up to the legacy she carried, honor bound to succeed where others expected her to fail, and honor bound to prove that true strength comes from the heart and spirit rather than from size or conventional expectations. The next morning would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself, but Maya Rodriguez would face them with the knowledge that she was not just fighting for her own dreams, she was carrying forward the legacy of Elena Martinez, one of the greatest warriors who had ever served.